These palm-lined shores of ancient Kerala provided the backdrop for one of the most unusual family reunions in regional folklore. The legend follows the Parai Petsalpanthirikalam, 12 siblings born to a woman from the outcast pariah community. While Kerala society was strictly stratified, as suggested by this group of men in traditional garments, these brothers occupied every level of that hierarchy. Once a year, they would gather for their father's death anniversary, crossing social boundaries that were otherwise impenetrable. The table seated two brothers at opposite ends of the social spectrum: Agnihothri, a wealthy Brahmin priest, and Pakkanar, an impoverished outcast. Friction occurs when it is time to serve the meal. Agnihothri's wife, concerned with maintaining her ritual purity as a Brahmin, refuses to interact openly with her lower caste brothers-in-law. She attempts to serve them while hiding behind one of these traditional flat circular umbrellas. She identifies this physical barrier as an act of pathivratadharma, the duty of a virtuous, chaste wife to avoid the gaze of other men. Pakkanar ridicules the display. He tells Agnihothri that his own wife, who lives in a hut and owns nothing, understands true virtue better than a woman who thinks it can be found behind a leaf umbrella. Agnihothri accepts the challenge, turning the family gathering into a direct comparison of behavioral ethics between the highest and lowest rungs of their society. The brothers go to Pakkanar's home first. The setting is a thatched-roofed building like this one, where the family's total resources consist of just 5 measures of grain. Pakkanar orders his wife to take half of that grain and process it immediately. This requires the heavy manual labor of pounding grain with wooden poles. She finishes the task and prepares a meal for the guests. Once the food is ready, Pakkanar gives a second command. He tells her to throw the fresh meal into the trash heap. She does so without a word. There is no anger and no questioning of why their limited food is being wasted. Pakkanar then has her repeat the entire process with their last remaining grain. When he tells her to throw that away too, she obeys a second time. In this first test, the outcast's wife demonstrated a total prioritization of her husband's will over her own hunger and survival. The scene shifts to Agnihothri's wealthy mansion to replicate the experiment with his wife. Agnihothri orders his wife to pound 2 measures of grain. She immediately argues, pointing out that they already have plenty of rice ready, and that his request is a waste of effort. When he tells her to throw the food away, she refuses. She calls the request madness and walks away, leaving the task unfinished and the command ignored. To finalize the contrast, Pakkanar recounts an incident from his own home that suggests his wife's character has a power beyond simple obedience. He describes his wife gathering water from a stone well. She was pulling a heavy bucket up the shaft, but the moment Pakkanar called her name, she let go of the rope to answer him. The bucket did not fall back into the water. The rope and weight stayed suspended in mid-air, held by an impossible devotion. Agnihothri saw the contrast between his wife's resentment and this outcast's impossible discipline. He conceded the point. Status was no substitute for the type of character that could move a person to ignore their own survival or even suspend the laws of nature. The story identifies virtue as an active choice rather than a passive ritual performed behind a screen. In a modern context, we recognize that the virtue being tested here is a form of extreme patriarchal control. The wife's worth is measured by her willingness to discard her own needs entirely. However, looking at the fracturing of this pyramid, we see the story's historical function. It uses the domestic sphere to attack the logic of the caste system, replacing a hierarchy of birth with a hierarchy of character. By centering the victory on an outcast woman, the folklore humiliates the ruling class. It suggests that the purity they claim to possess through birth is actually found in the very people they consider unclean. This legend of a divided family functions to deconstruct a rigid social order. It presents a version of greatness that must be practiced rather than inherited, forcing the ruling class to recognize a level of discipline in an outcast that they themselves could not match.